All right, so today we're going to be talking about Chapter 8, Lesson 4. This is all about more two-step equations. The difference between this lesson and Lesson 2, which was two-step equations, is simply that we're going to have the distributive property or something that looks a lot like this instead of what we had in Lesson 1 or Lesson 2. So there's a couple of different ways that we can solve these problems. The first way is by undoing the distributive property first. So that'll be getting the 5 times the x and the 5 times the 6. To get an equation that looks like this is very, very similar to the equations that we had in Lesson 2. And now that we have this, we can solve our two-step equation by subtracting 30 from both sides to undo the addition first. I then have 5x equals 10. And then to undo the multiplication, divide both sides by 5, and I get x equals 2. The other method that we can use, and this is going to be here in the second part, is to get rid of this first. So instead of doing the distributive property and multiplying all the way through, we can get rid of this 2/3 out front here first. And what you would do to get rid of a fraction was to multiply by its reciprocal. This over here becomes 1, so I'm left with k minus 5. And then 4 times 3 over 2, or sorry, negative 4 times 3 over 2 is going to get you negative 6. And now I have a one-step equation where I add 5 to both sides, and I'm left with k equals negative 1. It's your choice, whichever one you decide to do. Generally, if there's simply an integer out front, it might be easier to do the distributive property and solve that way. If there's a fraction or a rational number out front, sometimes it's simply easier to multiply by the reciprocal and get whatever is left on the inside of the parentheses by itself. So it's your choice. But let's look at example 2. This is a word problem that's going to help us write an equation from last lesson and then solve the equation from this lesson. So Tony buys 4 shirts at a clearance sale. Each shirt is discounted $3.50 off the regular price. If the total cost was $65, what is the price of the shirts? So, first of all, let's define a variable. S is the price of a shirt. So if we're looking at the S of the original price of the shirt, that means that the new price would be this S minus 3.5. That's the new price. Now, he bought 4 of those shirts, and the total cost was $65. Now, it's your choice, depending on what you want to do. I see that it's easier to do the distributive property than it would be to divide both sides by 4. But if you choose to divide both sides by 4, what you would have is S minus 3.5. That's going to be equal to 16.25. If you decide to do the distributive property, you have 4S minus 14 equals 65. You would then add 14 to both sides, so you'd have 4s equals 79. Or if you decided to divide both sides by 4, you would add 3.5 to both sides, and you get s is equal to 19.75. That would be the cost of the shirt. You'd have to divide both sides by 4 here then, so you'd still get 19.75. And of course, it's your choice. But this means that each shirt costs $19.75 originally. All right, let's look at our last example here. Example 3, solve 3 times x plus 2 equals 13. Again, you can either do the distributive property, which I think is going to be the easiest way to do it. So we'd have 3 times x, which is 3x, 3 times 2, which is 6, and then add those because the addition sign in between equals 13. If you wanted to divide both sides by 3, you'd have x plus 2 equals 4 1/3. Subtract 6 from both sides, we get 3x equals 7. Here we'd subtract 2 from both sides, and I get x is equal to 2 1/3. I'd get the exact same thing here, x equals 2 1/3. So really, it's your choice what you want to do. Undoing the distributive property first is an extra step, but it leads to some nicer looking equations at the beginning. If you decide to divide both sides by 3 first, you get a one-step equation later, but sometimes we get some nasty fractions in this problem then. So it's really your choice, but this is the end of lesson 4. So if you have any questions, please let me know.